let us briefly get into UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Spivak. We call him Spivak here on the Anik and Florian podcast. Fucking Spivak out there. So you felt like this main event result was an eventuality. You felt like this matchup for Derek Lewis at whatever stage of his career was just not good. And obviously you lauded Sergey Spivak in the process, but you made it a 3-unit play. And whether you stayed up until 3:30 in the morning or not, it didn't take long for you to get this one home. So what were your thoughts on the budding heavyweight contender, Sergey Spivak?
I think it's a reminder for everyone out there who gets excited when they see a guy lean out. We are so programmed to look at visual things like what we see. Oh, the guy looks jacked and he looks this and he looks leaned out. And I saw him lift this and this. Like, nobody cares. You need skills at the end of the day, okay? And Spivak was a terrible matchup for Derek Lewis. I am just always blown away by Spivak and how technical his takedowns are. Nobody seems to be talking about this or appreciating the high-level takedowns that he's doing. This isn't just a regular single leg or a double leg, which, of course, can be appreciated and are very difficult to pull off. But when I see a guy looking for foot trips and immediately combo off of that into a head and arm throw right into side control, this is high-level stuff, guys. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to execute high-level judo skills in mixed martial arts. So Spivak's a problem. He stayed on Derek Lewis and exposed a vulnerability in Derek Lewis that is just not going to get shored up at this stage of the game. Yes, he looked like he was leaner, but that's not going to improve his jiu-jitsu skills. He's got to be on the ground working that every single day, a couple times a day. That is the hardest skill: grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, sambo, whatever the grappling skill. You need to improve that and do it for a long period of time. And Derek Lewis has never looked comfortable. He's never looked dangerous on the ground. He always seems like he's lost down there. And that's going to be the case moving forward. This is why it was not a good fight for him, and the lack of consistency, and then the full consistency on Spivak's side. This is a guy who's very consistent. He knows exactly what he needs to do, goes out there and executes it. And I thought it was a very, very clean performance from him.
I'm really excited to see Sergey Spivak now against one of the heavyweight division's elite. And Cody, if you could populate the chat with the top 10, I'd appreciate that. Sometimes it is hard to quantify what you're seeing. Even for somebody like me who is paid to watch these UFC live events 25 times a year, am I supposed to sort of denigrate Derek Lewis because I feel, not that I feel shortchanged by the main event, like I felt like I knew what was going to happen. Our podcast producer felt like Derek Lewis, felt like Spivak should have been minus 1,000, right? Like, am I supposed to credit Spivak as you have done, or am I supposed to just get excited about Spivak now against one of the division's elite? Because candidly for me, Kenny, I woke up to watch this fight and I didn't even bother not getting a spoiler. It just felt like an eventuality, right? Yeah. Just avoid that early onslaught from Derek Lewis or whatever it is, get him down. And, Derek Lewis was able to, force these perpetual mat returns because he was able to get up. But my gosh, man, I don't know. If I look at Shamil Abdurrahimov against Jailton Almeida, at least Shamil is desperate and urgent and right. Am I nuts?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And this is a performance, unfortunately, I would think that is going to cause the UFC to really look at Derek Lewis and go, I don't know if we can have him in a main event again. And that's going to hurt him in a lot of different ways. And maybe he's done, maybe he doesn't really care about that stuff. But for the UFC, it's unfortunate because he was one of those guys that you can rely on to go out there, fight hard. But I think that that weakness on the ground, his inability to adapt and adjust over time and really improve that skill. And this performance here where he literally did nothing. There is not a lot of times as a fighter, you're like, okay, I lost, but let me see what I can do to improve. And let me look for some positives here. There's just no positives here for Derek Lewis in this fight, unfortunately. I love the guy. He's hilarious. He's always going to be dangerous on the feet. But this was one of those where I'm not sure we'll see him in a main event for a very long time unless he's able to go on some kind of long streak. Because right now, you're not selling the fans on a Derek Lewis main event at any time.
No, you're right. You're right. And you say it respectfully as usual. You give him a striker, maybe on pay-per-view, but you can't give him a well-rounded top 7 heavyweight at this stage of his career. It's just not going to happen. And, the positives for Derek Lewis, obviously the show money, the bankroll, the bank account, whatever that check is going to be for this headlining spot. The UFC has long had a penchant for headlining heavyweights. And, there are a lot of women that headline. There are a lot of heavyweights that headline. If you look at the UFC fight nights annually, and it certainly goes back to the Joe Silva days with the heavyweights. I understand it, right? Baddest men on the planet collectively. But I would agree with you. So in terms of Sergey Spivak, as we spin it forward, Ken Flo, I know we had Marcin Tybura, who is number 10 in the world, win a fight on this very card against Blagoy Ivanov. I mean, I think you could headline Spivak again every day of the goddamn week. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is out there at number 9 in the world. Derek Lewis was 7. So you got to think that Sergey Spivak moves into that top 7. Tom Aspinall on the mend, number 6 in the world. Aspinall has actually talked about an outside chance that he gets back for UFC 286. I don't see that, but any thoughts on who you'd like to see next for the polar bear, Sergey Spivak?
Well, I kind of like a nice, consistent, steady climb up. I don't think it warrants a huge jump up because he's still getting the right experience. He didn't get any challenge in this fight, but the other guy, the other heavyweight who fought, Marcin Tybura, why not put him up against Sergey Spivak? Isn't one of those things that people are going to go nuts about, but Tybura is very consistent. He's fighting very smart right now, and I think that's another one where if you do see Spivak as a guy who could challenge for the belt in the future, I think that's a nice challenge for him to gain a lot of experience, improve from there, and we'll see exactly how good he is, because Tybura is definitely a tough challenge for him.
In terms of Derek Lewis and the cardio and maybe the body fat, right? I will agree with you. I will try as an MMA fan and a broadcaster, more importantly, I will try to not lean so much into that stuff. But when Zhang Wei Li, Ken Flo, picks up fucking Francis Ngannou, right? That still should count for something, right? Is that okay if I use that on the broadcast, right? Because sometimes there are things like that, honestly, like how many straw weights, right? Other than Zhang Wei Li and maybe Jessica Andrade, and I'm sure there are a bunch of Tatiana Suarez motherfucking me out there somewhere. Casey O'Neill, I love you. I'm not talking about your division right now. But Kenny, how many strawweights are going to be able to pick up Francis Ngannou the way Zhang Wei Li did, right? Like sometimes I feel like there's something that actually we should lean the fuck into. No?
Yeah, I'm also just thinking about how Anik needs to go into stand-up comedy at some point. Yeah, no, I agree, dude. She is one of the best athletes in the UFC, period. The improvements, the athleticism that she displays in the UFC, it's something you got to talk about, because how many people look like that technically and physically in such a short amount of time? That you got to be something special in order to do that. So yes, there are exceptions, no question about it.
Thank you. So I'm kind of on one a little bit this morning. So the whole routine about you can ignore the queen, but she's still the queen with the mug, right? Like you could turn that into stand-up comedy. You absolutely could. Is sexism still allowed in 2023?
If it's comedy, it's all good.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have things I could say negatively about men and women, Right. I happen to enjoy hanging out with men more than hanging out with women. But to the women who listen to this program, God love you. All right. So a couple of big retirements this week, Ken Flo. Tom Brady, Fedor Emelianenko. So I'm going to take you on a little trip down memory lane. I promise I won't bring up your career and embarrass you. But Fedor Emelianenko retires after a loss to Ryan Bader. And this dude was the man. Like when I was first starting to cover mixed martial arts, it's like, hey, man, Fedor Emelianenko, right? Forget Nomar, right? You want a one-name athlete. It's Fedor, and it's probably Fyodor, and you better pronounce his name correctly. And at the time we started MMA Live, 2007, 2008, Fedor had just defeated 7'2" Hongman Choi to improve to 28-1. Hongman Choi, by the way, would go on to beat the likes of Jose Canseco. Anyway, so Fedor was 28-1 when we launched the Live in 2008, and obviously he retires here at 46 years of age with a bevy of legends behind him. A pretty cool visual over the weekend for the great Fedor Emelianenko.
I was such a huge fan of Fedor Emelianenko over time. He beat a lot of jiu-jitsu legends, and that pissed me off. And I was like, I want to see some jiu-jitsu guy out there just submit him, beat him, do something. And Big Nog was my guy. And I was like, he's going to be the guy. He was not the guy. Fedor just beat everybody in his path. And I think when he beat Crow Cop in the rematch, which was one of the most special fights in mixed martial arts history. I would get up. I was one of those guys who'd get up like middle of the night to watch Pride. And Fedor was just right after that. I was like, dude, I got it. And I studied him a lot, and I learned so much from his fights. And he was one of the best heavyweights, no question about it. And it's sad, someone posted something about how mixed martial arts does legends dirty consistently. And while maybe there's an argument for that, but you have to understand that it's fighters themselves that a lot of times do that. It'd be nice to kind of jump on that bandwagon and say, it's all the promotion's fault, who loves to throw them out to die out there against, some younger talent. But the fighters oftentimes are the ones making the decision to fight way past their prime. And, that oftentimes is more sad than anything else. And you have to understand, if you're going out there and you want to be a part of this promotion and be a part of these big fights, they're not going to give you just some can out there. They're going to give you someone tough. And you don't always have a choice. And if you decide to continue fighting and you are past your prime, I don't know. It's kind of on you. And I think so many fighters fight way past their prime, and in the process end up kind of, at the very least, diluting their legacy. On the other spectrum of things, they end up destroying their legacy. I can give you plenty of examples. I don't want to disrespect anybody, but it's sad. And I would love to remember Fedor as the guy who was the best heavyweight in the world at a certain point. Of course, we never saw him come over to the UFC and challenge the likes of Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar and some of the other guys. But so that was unfortunate. But, I would have liked to seen Fedor Emelianenko retire several years ago. But hey, this is mixed martial arts. It keeps him happy. It keeps him motivated and inspired. And, who the hell am I? But it's just sad to see a lot of these guys who are true legends of the game just stick around for too long.
Even if in the case of Fedor Emelianenko, you retire having won 2 of your last 3, even if you get some wins, it doesn't necessarily mean that maybe you shouldn't have retired a little bit earlier. But it is interesting when you talk about the legendary fighters, and we're not going to mention them by name, but there are probably a dozen or 2 legends, right? Whose, I'm going to come back to it, Wikipedia pages, right? Just looks like a Jamaican beard, just a bunch of red stripe, just red stripe everywhere. So I agree with you. In the case of a lot of these fighters, they stick around a little bit too long. I don't think that the UFC necessarily does wrong by the legends. We do go to great lengths with the UFC Hall of Fame to try to acknowledge all of these athletes. And I do think in time, like most of the people who are on the outside looking in are going to get into the UFC Hall of Fame. But yeah, I mean, always more could be done. And to that end, by the way, did you happen to see the visual of all the legends with Fedor Emelianenko? All right, so I'm going to mention them all by name very quickly if I could. Dan Henderson, Renzo Gracie, Chael Sonnen, Randy Couture, Mark Coleman, Frank Shamrock, Josh Barnett, Matt Hughes, Hoist Gracie, the Iceman Chuck Liddell, Quentin Rampage Jackson. You're never getting that again. That was really cool to see. I would imagine, Kenny, for a guy like you who fought for titles, in and around the time that a lot of these guys were relevant, it was pretty cool for you to see that assemblage of talent, if you will.
No question about it. It shows the amount of respect that other legends in the game had for Fedor. That was their era, and Fedor sat above everybody else on the throne when they were all fighting. So pretty cool to see that support.
My guy Frank Shamrock out there, right? You were trying to bang on Frank Shamrock, fucking legend, man. Go look up Frank Shamrock in his prime. A lot of injuries. The first MMA event that I covered in Tunica, Mississippi in 2007, the main event was Frank Shamrock against Renzo Gracie. And again, I'm an impressionable, formative year type MMA fan at this point in time. And it was an illegal knee to the head, I believe, from Frank Shamrock to Renzo Gracie that called an end to the main event. Now, can you imagine my excitement? I'm there like doing radio all week in Tunica, Mississippi. My first ever live mixed martial arts event, Elite XC1, and it ends unceremoniously. So I wanted Renzo to fight on. So for years, I was like Team Shamrock. So
it was a couple of legal knees, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, well, hey, back then, 2007, those are fucking legal as far as I'm concerned in any promotion.